Responds for our Patreon community. I want to talk today about what is happening in the U.S. economy, but I want to be real and realistic because that is these days so rare. Here's what I want to stress, which in a sense I suspect you kind of know already. Everything is out of control. There's been no adequate preparation for any of it. Not the pandemic, not the crash of capitalism on top of it, and not now the renewal of police horror tactics, racism, all the protests that we see cascading around the country. If ever you needed multiple signs, that things are out of control, you have them. And make no mistake, the economy is in that shape too. I'm going to give you just a few sample statistics to understand it. In April and May, roughly half of all commercial establishments, stores of all kinds, restaurants, and so on, did not pay their rent to their landlords. What that means is that the landlords are in deep trouble. Why? Not only they're not earning their money, but they borrowed heavily at banks and they cannot repay the banks. Therefore, there are lawsuits being filed, dozens of them every day across the United States, in which landlords are suing the stores who aren't paying rent. Banks are beginning to sue the landlords who aren't paying back their loans. It's a spiraling out of control situation, and it has serious ramifications because commercial loans have been packaged into securities in just the way that mortgages were that led to the crash of 2008 and 9. And so the people who invested in those securities, counting on those commercial loans to be repaid, are not going to see their money, and they are going to sue. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. Millions of homeowners have stopped paying rent. Their landlords, therefore, can't pay back their loans. Millions of companies have been unable to honor all kinds of contracts because of the pandemic, because of the crash, because of the government's handing out money based on political considerations that have very little to do with the underlying economic reality. It is chaotic, and we will have more chaos because of the problems with the pandemic and the capitalist system being used to treat them. One more statistic. There are now dozens of companies running around the United States peddling corona tests. Tests not only for whether you have the disease, but whether you have the antibodies to the disease. They're going to employers and saying, look, only 5%, not even, of the American people have been tested. You're going to be hiring or rehiring people who may in fact be sick and who may be infectious. You need a test to weed them out. And we've got just the thing for you, a super special kit. Here it is for $325. Between you and me, it costs about $4 to make this thing. You get the picture? But employers are terrified. They don't want to bring back workers who get sick 2 days in, 6 days in, 2 weeks in, 3 months in. They have to retrain people. They have to train new people. They won't get all the old people back. They don't want to spend the money to train, the time, the energy, and have people get sick. And they're worried about lawsuits too. They don't want to spend the money to make the workplace safe. So they want to save the money by excluding people who test positive. I won't even raise the moral or ethical question of what I just said, excluding people who may in fact have no symptoms because they have a disease. And remember, neither the company peddling these tests nor the employer who hires that company has any responsibility for the people turned away. They're on their own, and who knows what will happen to them. Okay, the situation is out of control. What happens when that is the reality in economics? Everybody's on their own. Who will win the lawsuit between the landlord and the store? It depends who has the better lawyer, who has more money to spend on lawyers. Same between banks and landlords. Same between landlords and individual families that are tenants. Same with banks and people who can't make their mortgages or aren't paying them. We are in a lot of trouble, and it's every man, every woman for themselves. It's what happens when systems break down. The rules don't apply because the enforcer of the rules, the government, is so lost in its own political, narrow self-interest that it can't rise to the function of keeping the thing together. And the bad news in all of that is for the mass of us, for the working people. Because if we're not organized the way all businesses are, in their associations, in their lobbying groups, in their setups and their lawyers and their PR departments, the mass of people have none of it. The little bit that the labor movement once did, it is too weak to do now. If we don't organize a new labor movement or rebuild the existing one, and if we don't have political parties speaking for us, yes, let's call them by what they are, socialist parties, labor parties, things like that. If we don't have both the unions and the political, we won't be organized. And if it's everyone for themselves, the battle will come to us. Working people will be sacrificed. A number of companies have been caught taking billions in government help, using the money while firing thousands of workers, using the money to sustain their payouts, their dividends to shareholders. If you give money, government money, to the people who run businesses, they'll use it for what they have as priorities. They're organized not only to do it, but to use the political muscle, the PR funds, to get away with it. If the working class doesn't mount its own organizations, it will be the sacrificial lamb that everybody else exploits. That's the lesson of a system spinning out of control.